Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Thank you very much for joining today. I wanted to continue with Srimad Bhagavatam 10th Canto, chapter 55, and wanted to seek your good wishes, your blessings, so that we can continue and seek the good wishes and blessings of our ever well wishes, Radha Krishna, Krishna Balaram, Gaunitai, Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj. So this is a verse which we can recite, 36th verse of the 55th chapter. Vigyartho atho api bhagwan tusmin asa janadana narado kathaya sarvam sambara harana dikam. So translation: although Lord Janardhan knew perfectly well what had happened, he remained silent. The sage Narad, however, explained everything, beginning from Sambara's kidnapping of the child. So Lord, of course, knows everything about everything, but he remains usually silent so that things can take its ordinary course of activity, whatever's meant to happen happens. Because if he reveals everything, then you might stop the natural flow of events. Okay, so this chapter is about the history of Pradyumna. Tells how he was born as a son of Krishna, then he was kidnapped by the demon Sambara. It also describes how Pradyumna killed Sambara and returned home with a wife. So the appearance of Pradyumna, Kamdev, Cupid, an expansion of Lord Vasudeva. So it's one of the, I think it's Aniruddha, it's Pradyumna, Pradyumna himself. One of the first quadruple expansion. So we had Krishna and then Balaram. From Balaram comes Sankarshan, and that's the first quadruple expansion. So Cupid had been burned to ashes by Lord Shiva's anger, and he was reborn as Pradyumna from the womb of Rukmini. So the first wife of Lord Krishna, his first son, Pradyumna. A demon named Sambara, thinking Pradyumna was his enemy, kidnapped him from the maternity room even before he was 10 days old. So this is quite extraordinary. Krishna's son, incarnation of the Supreme Lord, son of Rukmini, was kidnapped by a demon while he was in the maternity room. So Sambara threw Pradyumna into the ocean and he returned to his kingdom. What a crazy thing, huh? A powerful fish swallowed Pradyumna and was caught by a fisherman in a net. So now this fisherman, he worked in the kingdom of Sambara. So they presented this huge fish to Sambara, that demon who threw Pradyumna into the ocean. And when the cooks cut that fish open, they found a child within its belly, still alive, of course. The cooks gave the infant to the maidservant Mayavati, who was astonished to see him. And just then, Narad Muni, the transcendental spaceman, appeared, and he revealed to her that this boy is actually Cupid in his previous life. Her husband. So Mayavati was actually Cupid's wife, Kamdev's wife, and her name was Rati Devi. Now she was born as Mayavati. And the husband came to her as an infant child. So now I'm going to explain. While waiting for her husband to be born in a new body, she had taken employment as a cook in the household of Sambara. So now Mayavati understood who this infant child was. She began to feel intense affection for him. After a very short time, Padumna grew to youthful maturity, entrancing all the women with his beauty. So he was extremely beautiful. And he matured very, very fast. I don't know the time scale. That's not described in Bhagavatam. Oops, wrong button. So there you go. That's the fish coming out of the infant coming out of the fish. So once Rati Devi, that's Mayavati, approached Padumna and playfully moved her eyebrows in a conjugal mood, addressing her as his mother, because he looked upon Mayavati as his mother because she was looking after him. So Padumna commented that she was putting aside her proper maternal mood and behaving like a passionate girlfriend. What's going on? He didn't expect this. So then Rati Devi told Padumna who they both were. So she revealed to him everything. And she advised him to kill Sambara. And to help him do that, she instructed him in the mystic mantras known as Mahamaya. So just like Cupid is very expert in attracting, so the wife of Cupid is also mystically very powerful. So she taught him the powers of this mystic mantras. Padumna went to Sambara, and after angering him with various insults, Padumna challenged Sambara to a fight. And Sambara took up his club angrily, and they marched outside. The demon tried various magical spells against Padumna, but Padumna fended off all of them with the Mahamaya mantras, and then eventually beheaded Sambara with his sword. At that moment, Rati Devi appeared in the sky and took Padumna away to Dwarka. When Padumna and his wife, who resembled a cloud accompanied by lightning, as they descended from the sky into the inner chambers of Lord Krishna's palace, the many beautiful ladies there thought he was Krishna himself. He is the son of Krishna, the first son, so he looked like Krishna. They were thinking, hey, what's Krishna doing here? What's the Lord doing here? So much, so that's because his appearance really, and dress even, matched or resembled the Lord's. So when they see Krishna, out of shyness, they ran away. They ran here and there to hide themselves. But then after a while, they noticed some small differences between Padumna and Krishna's appearances. And then they understood, he's actually not Krishna. So they gathered around him. Who are you? If you're not Krishna. They were very inquisitive. Delighted and astonished, they approached Padumna and his consort, who was a jewel amongst women. So, and of course, all this time, Rukmini was present as well. When she saw Padumna, she felt overwhelmed with motherly love, and milk began to flow spontaneously from her breasts. Now remember, Padumna was taken away when he was like 10 days old. So Rukmini must have been greatly distressed, noting that Padumna looked exactly like Krishna. She became eager to find out who he is. She remembered how one of her sons, she had 10 in total, first one being Padumna, how one of her sons had been abducted from the maternity room. And she was thinking, if he was still alive, she thought, he would be the same age as Padumna standing before me. He must be the same child I bore in my womb. since I feel great affection for him, and my left arm is quivering. So when Rukmini reflected in this way, Krishna arrived in the company of Devaki and Vasudeva. Although the Lord understood the situation perfectly well, he remained silent. Then Narad Muni arrived and explained everything. So that's the verse that we chanted. Everyone was amazed to hear the account, and they greeted and embraced Pradyumna in great ecstasy. Hearing that lost Pradyumna had come home, the residents of Dwarka declared, Providence has allowed this child to return as if from death. Because Pradyumna's beauty so closely resembled Krishna's, the ladies in the maternal relationship with Pradyumna could not help but privately think of him as their conjugal lover. He was, after all, the exact reflection of Sri Krishna, and he's Cupid. Therefore, it was natural for them to see him in this way. He appeared before their eyes as Cupid himself, since even those on the level of his mother felt conjugal attraction for him, then what to speak of other women, how other women felt when they saw him. This is the beauty of Pradyumna. Very, very beautiful. Just like Krishna. He's an incarnation. He's an avatar of Krishna. So what do you expect? Any questions or any comments before we go into the instructions? That's the end of chapter 55.
Prabhuji,
Yes,
it is not on Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
It is not on this chapter, but the chapter 54, which I could not attend on Saturday. I was reading about, there's a definition of Kal, and it says the time. He said it's not like what it includes what we think as weeks and days and the months and year. It also needs, Kal also means destiny. That you are, that is your destiny. When you say your card, it also defines your destiny. I think it makes sense that thinking of card as that way, rather than in the time that we think of.
Yeah, it's interesting. Very interesting. Yeah.
Sometimes we say in Gujarati, it means your destiny is over
this
now.
Come. Yeah.
So it makes quite a huge sense to me. And I was quite sort of enlightened by this, the new meaning of card.
So not just in terms of hours, seconds, hours, minutes, whatever, but actually in terms of your destiny. When your time is up, sort of thing. Or when the time is right, things will happen. Until the time is right, it's not going to happen. So no matter how much you push it, it ain't going to happen. Yeah. It's a really good point. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Naniben. And do you remember where that was?
It was quite in the beginning of chapter 54.
Okay.
Thank
you for sharing that.
Yes.
Yeah, time is interesting because here in this world, like Krishna says, time I am the destroyer of all the three worlds.
Yes. Yeah. So that I was for quite some time. Krishna says his call, which is eternal. And I just couldn't understand in how we count it, the time as seconds and minutes and hours. But what I read today made huge sense to me.
And this time is very interesting because here, of course, time goes forward and we can't really go backwards. So time controls everything. Hence why Krishna says, time, I am time, destroyer of all the three worlds. Because in time, everything gets destroyed. But in the spiritual kingdom, time is still there. But instead of controlling the spiritual world, it is a servant of the spiritual world. It's a servant of Krishna. So time has different conception there. It's past, present, and future can exist at the same time, which is really very, very hard for us to conceive. And that's why the gopis and Krishna, they have, if you like, the same pastime every day. But because of the influence of time, they don't necessarily remember the pastime that took place the previous day. So that's why sometimes we think, how can they have these pastimes every single day? Don't they get bored? But now it's fresh every time because time serves them rather than time destroys them. So very interesting.
Very true.
No, thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Anything else to ask or share? I like it's very nice. It's very important to read if devotees get a chance to read the chapters as we're going on, like Nani Ben is doing, because then we can share between us, these nice points. Because what happens when you discuss the points, it's easier to remember them later as well. So, thank you so much, Nani Ben. Really good. All right, Madhusudan Prabhu, would you like to go through the instructions?
Haribol, Hare Krishna. Yeah. When Nani referred to 54, chapter 54 in the earlier part, that's the part where Jarasandha is trying to pacify, what's his name? Shishupal, yeah. So he's using this concept of time and happiness and distress and so earlier on in the chapter, that is that part where he uses the concept of time. But that's, like you said, in the material world, time consumes everything and it's a cyclic, and time is like a spiral, not repeating certain things, like Kali, we're forgetting that, while we're doing this, it's all happening in a day of Brahma as well. So that time concept is we forget that, all this is in a day, and then there's a kalpa, and then, it can get quite complex, but interesting. Yeah, it's good to notice some of these things, and share it like that. So, and then later on, Balaram obviously pacifies Rukmini in a different way, like a spiritual intelligence. So, yeah. So this chapter 54 is also interesting, how Pradyumna and Cupid, and you start to wonder, what is going on? Child gets abducted, not even within 10 days or so. You get notice, they look for him or what, and it's amazing, but Krishna knows, Krishna is his plan. So, but then there's Krishna's expansion. So in Krishna's pastimes, other expansions and plenary expansions also take part in amazing ways. So we're seeing how Krishna is playing the part in Dwarka and all that, but there are other plenary expansions like, Sankarshan, Balaram, Sankarshan, Aniruddha, and Pradyumna, and they also take part in his pastimes in the way Krishna wants it to be. So in the purport, there's Prabhupada actually expands in Krishna Srimad Bhagavatam. So in his English rendering of the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.14.30 purport, Srila Prabhupada confirms the absolute status of Pradyumna, Lord Krishna's first son. Pradyumna and Aniruddha are also expansions of the personality of Godhead, and thus they are also Vishnu Tattva. At Dwarka, Lord Vasudeva is engaged in his transcendental pastimes along with his plenary expansions, namely Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, and therefore each and every one of them can be addressed as a personality of Godhead. So this is how Srila Prabhupada explains, that Pradyumna is also just like Krishna in his spiritual expansions. And so from these pastimes, we can understand the position of different personalities like Rudra, Cupid, and also other demigods, and also Narad Muni, who actually clarifies the whole situation even to Rukmini. So other personalities like, how Mayavati ends up being with that demon, Sambhala, and, because it explains how she had gone to Lord Shiva, and Sambara had also gone to Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva's position is like he is a devotee, but he grants the boons very easily without thinking the consequences. So he actually ends up giving the boon to Samara before, and then he said he actually wanted Rati, who had also gone there. And so she ends up being with him then. So then she complains to Lord Shiva, say, how can you just do this? He said, don't worry, you go there and then something will be sorted out for you. So then eventually she ends up serving as a cook and then Pradyumna appears there and then they get reunited and all that. So, but then he also explains how these are different personalities and they have different roles to play within the Lord's pastimes. So they're not all like some might regard, oh, Lord Shiva and Brahman, or they're the same, they're all gods. And there's a Hindu concept, and that's why we get caught up in thinking that we're Hindus, yes. And Hindus kind of get confused with all these different things, but also this aspect destroys the Mayavad and the impersonalism as well. Okay, Haribol, Hare Krishna.
No, thank you for sharing that. That was very interesting. I hadn't gone into the history of Pradyumna or Mayavati and Cupid. All I remember is that one time I think Lord Shiva Cupid was trying to entice him, and with his third eye he destroyed Cupid.
Yeah, that's right. And then Cupid's wife, obviously at that time, she's upset then, and then she goes to Lord Shiva and she tries to, get him back. But this is how it ends up being a pastime like this.
Very interesting. Thank you very much.
Yeah, interesting. But then also in this chapter is amazing how the mantras can be used as weapons against each other, and just mantras can also be like the Mahamaya mantras are actually in the mode of goodness, whereas the mantras that the demon was using, they were kind of materialistic and maybe in the mode of passion, ignorance, I don't know. But the mantras were not effective against Mahamaya.
Interesting. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Also, Prabhuji, Haribol. This Pradyuman, who is Krishna's son, is mentioned in this chapter that he's the same as Pradyuman of the first Chaturvyu expansion.
Same.
Yeah, same. Yeah, that's cool.
Interesting. So this in Madhusudan got it on the instructions, Pradyumna and Aniruddha. Aniruddha is also one of the sons of Krishna. So they are also expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And they're Vishnu Tattva. They're Vishnu.
So when Lord Krishna actually expands the spiritual world, his first expansion is Sankarshan, which is Balaram actually. And Balaram, Sankarshan. So interesting because even Lord Shiva then, we call him Shankar Bhagwan because he worships Sankarshan, who helps him to deal with the poison as well. So interesting. There's somewhere else in the past.
Let's just have a quick look at something. If I can find it, of course. 1 second. Yeah. Let me just find it. Because if you see in that purport, which Madhusudan very kindly reproduced, talks about Vasudev. Let me just see if I can bring it out here. Of course, when you're looking for it, you can never find it, isn't it? Oh yeah, thank you. So, no, wrong one. Let's just do a quick pause. So if we look at this chart, we have Krishna, first expansion, as Madhusudan said, Balaram, from whom comes the first Chaturvyu, right? The first quadruple expansion. Vasudev, Sankarsana,
Vasudev, yeah.
Padma, Aniruddha. So in Dwarka, this is the Vasudev who's there, not the original Krishna. He always is in Vrindavan. But the one in Dwarka is this one here, Vasudev. And Shankarsana is Balaram. Padumna, we just talked about. Aniruddha we'll see a little later. So interesting to note that the Krishna in Dwarka is this Vasudev. So if we just go back
And the
to,
Balaram is Sankarsana.
and the Balaram is this, that Sankarshan. Yeah, let's just go back to what Madhu
So
said.
in that same purport where I took that section where Prabhupada says that, it also mentions that in Krishna Sandarbha, Srila Jiva Goswami cites the following verse of the Gopal Tapani Upanishad to prove that Pradyumna, who is the son of Krishna and Rukmini, is the same Pradyumna who is a member of Lord Krishna's eternal fourfold plenary expansion, the Chatur Vyuha. So that verse actually says that there in Dwarka, the Almighty Lord Krishna, endowed with his full potency, resides in the company of his three plenary expansions, Balaram, Aniruddha, and Pradyumna. The Krishna Sandarbha then goes on to explain that with reference to the present verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that the Cupid whom Rudra burnt up with his anger is a demigod subordinate to Indra. This demigod Cupid is a partial manifestation of the prototype Cupid Pradyumna, who is the plenary expansion of Vasudev.
Interesting. That's good.
And the demigod Cupid, being unable to attain the new body on his own, entered within the body of Pradyumna, because otherwise Cupid would have had to remain in a perpetual state of disembodiment, a result of Rudra's having incinerated him with his anger. So Cupid would have been without any body, so he actually goes into Pradyumna, and quite complex. But anyway.
That's Jiva Goswami, yeah, explaining that.
Yeah, Jiva Goswami explaining that bit.
Wow, well done. Thank you for that. That's really insightful, actually. Really good.
Yeah, but like you say also that, in Dwarka, it's Vasudeva, not original Krishna, and the other expansions, that they're all taking part in all these pastimes. And
it's pretty complex. So this is the point, isn't it? Vasudeva engaged in his transcendental past along with his plenary expansions, namely Sankarshan, Padumna, and Aniruddha. So that's the first Chaturvyu.
Yeah, okay.
Very good. Thank you so much.
There you go.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.